Good morning and welcome to our third gardening video. It's finally time to make our third one because if you remember in our first gardening video we planted a seed and I finally have something to show you. Our seed went ahead and sprouted and today we're going to talk about the parts of the plant and also something important that those parts are made to do. Okay? Also, just a tip to parents, if you're doing this at home with your kids, I always try and plant a bean seed, at least one, along with everything else, because they generally are the ones that are going to sprout quickest, grow quickest, and have something to show you. That's why we planted a bean for this. Okay? This is the second step in the plant's life cycle, the first being the seed. So if we take a look at it here, you can almost see way down here in this empty space the remains of the seed case. That's that hard outer shell that I said had to fall off before the plant could grow. And then of course here's our stem coming up. And these two little pieces here that look like the bean seed that's split in half, that's called the cotyledon. And that's the part of the seed that I said was there to feed the plant while it was growing. So that's kind of a little lunchbox for the plant for it to have some food. And up here are the very first leaves that we have on our bean plant. So it's just getting ready to become a full-fledged plant. Once a plant is a certain size, it's time for it to go on to the next step in its life cycle. And for most plants, that is blooming. Here's some blooms I found in my yard. There's a couple of different things here, and we're going to take a look at them. They're very pretty. But actually, a bloom's job is not necessarily to be pretty to us. A bloom's job is to help the plant do its next important job, which is pollination. And we're going to take a look at that, and I'm going to show you how that works. Pollination is a really important part of a plant's job, and essentially it just means moving pollen from one place to another. Most plants do that. Most plants actually bloom, even the ones you don't notice, like trees and grass. They do bloom and produce pollen. So we're going to take a closer look at the blooms and see how that works. The petals are the brightly colored part of the flower that are there to attract attention, both from us and from the insects. Now inside the bloom, I'm going to kind of peel this back a little bit, you'll see the two main parts of the bloom that are important, and those are called the stamen and the pistil. So the stamen is this part here where the pollen is. You can see I can put my finger there a little bit and actually the pollen will come off on my finger. And the place the pollen wants to get to is up here at the top of the pistil. And it's actually a little bit sticky, so it will pick up the pollen really easily. And those are the two parts. Now each of our blooms is shaped a little bit differently. And that actually helps define which insect or animal is there to pollinate it. So this daffodil is pretty wide open, so a bigger bug like a bumblebee can get down in there. I do have something here that is very small. If you look at these little guys, now the plant is meant to go this way, but if you look kind of up underneath, you can see the opening of the blooms. And down in those little tiny holes is where the parts of the flower are. So this one is going to take a much, much smaller insect to pollinate. Now these hyacinths are kind of in between sized. So the light's a little bad on that one, but if you look way down there on the inside, there's the important parts where the pollen is, but they're kind of a little tighter, so they're going to take a smaller bug to pollinate that one. And last of all, we have these pretty purple ones. That's kind of a nice one. Same thing though, but it's pretty wide open, so it could be pollinated by almost anything because it's pretty wide open. So all of those are different shaped, but they all have basically the same parts. So how does that pollen get from one bloom to another? Well, essentially a plant does the same thing with pollen that it does with seeds. It tricks us or other animals into doing the job for it. Now there are some plants that are pollinated by the wind, and so that's a different process. But most of the time when we think of pollination, we think of animals doing that pollination for us. And of course, the one we think of most is a honeybee. A honeybee will be attracted to the plant by its smell or its color, and it'll crawl down in there to get the pollen and the nectar that's in the plant because that's what it eats. And it will generally accidentally get a little pollen on its outside, and it'll fly to another flower, and that pollen will fall off in that flower, and that's how the pollination occurs. But honeybees aren't the only ones that do this job. There's actually a number of animals, from bats and certain kinds of lemurs to beetles and flies and butterflies, and all different kinds of animals do this job. But the one we know of best is the honeybee. That's the reason that we need to take such good care of our honeybees, because some of the things we love to eat, like watermelons and strawberries and apples and mangoes, all those things wouldn't exist without our pollinators to do that job for us. So we always want to think about that when we see a honeybee or even any other kind of insect. They can be a little bit scary because they can sting you, but as long as you leave them alone to do their job, they generally will leave you alone to do yours. So we want to leave them alone and let them do that work so that we can have the yummy things we want to eat. Thanks for joining us today for our video about pollinators. Keep an eye out for more gardening videos to come. And before I go, I wanted to recommend a couple of books. This one I haven't seen yet in our e-media site, but it's very new, so you might find it later. It's called Honeybee by Candace Fleming, and it's a very nice book. It has lots of information in here and lots of beautiful illustrations, so I definitely recommend this one. And an older book I really like is called The Hive Detectives. It's a really great book that's part of the Scientists in the Field series. And it is by Lori Griffith Burns. It is on our e-media site, so if you go to clevenet.org and sign in, you can check it out, and it's about the mystery of the disappearing honeybees, and it's a really good book. So I hope you'll check out either one of those two, and see you again another day. Bye!